Yo, GM.
Yo,
Welcome to another episode of Accidental OGs. I'm Breezy.
I'm KML.
And KML, fill us in. Who did we speak? Who are we going to speak to on this episode?
So in this episode, we're speaking to Kevin Lambert, Chief Product Officer at Coin Games. My favorite part about the conversation is we talked a shit ton about gaming and Web3. Will we get there? Is the future coming? And yeah, what were your thoughts, Breezy?
Kevin was cool. I like that y'all had the same initials. He was also KML. And I like that and a lot of the times that we talk to people, they're like in a niche, right? They're like really down this rabbit hole. Kevin had like a great grasp of like the culture and building games and like the economics and psychology behind everything. He's kind of a polymath in those regards. So it was just fun to talk to somebody who like you could bounce around the spectrum, right? And I found that to be really cool.
Dope. Yeah, I agree. So with that, I hope y'all enjoy episode number 5 with Kevin, and we'll go into it.
Okay, cool. Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us. It's Easter Sunday when we were recording this, so I'm happy that you could make the time, or you didn't have any scheduling conflicts. Maybe you could help just give the viewers and listeners a little bit of a background about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
How you got into this space.
Sure. So it all started with video games for me. I've been making them for a little over 27 years now. It's been a long time. I knew I wanted to make video games ever since I was a kid, dating all the way back to the 70s, where I was introduced to them in a roller skating rink. This is going to date me super bad. But, when it was one of those school field trips to the roller skating rink and everybody's having a great time, and I'm just fixated in the arcade watching pinball and the first video games they had. And I'm just like, this is awesome. I'm like, how do I do this? And there were no tracks or paths to being a video game designer or video game developer back in those days. There are a lot now, but at the time, all you could do is just immerse yourself in the medium, go to the arcades every weekend, spend money on video games and consoles instead of food and clothing sometimes. And my folks were pretty supportive, thankfully, although they didn't get it. And it was sort of like, hey, we love your video games passion, but just in case it doesn't work out, can you get a skill that we understand, something that can get you a job that we can brag about to our friends who get it? And I'm like, oh, that's fine. Like, I was also really big on tech, so I figured developer, computer programmer was the way to go. So I got a degree in computer science and got into programming purely as a means to an end to get into game design and game development. And after a couple of years, a few years in college, and then I joined a video game company called Monolith. They were my first company. So they're now Warner Brothers, but back in the day, Monolith did some 2D games and some 3D games that, depending on how long you've been playing games, you may have heard of some of them, like No One Lives Forever, Tron 2.0. They did Blood and Shogo Armor Division, with like a mech first-person shooter way back in the day. So I had the privilege of working on a lot of those games. And then my first full-time game design gig was to lead the design of an RPG called Dungeon Siege 2. And this was at Gas Powered Games. They've made a lot of, they made kind of Chris Taylor's studio. It came from Total Annihilation, which is like RTS focused, but then got into RPGs and was sort of mixed. And Dungeon Siege 1 came out, did pretty well, and I led the design of the second game. So that was awesome. That was like a team of 40 people. And it was kind of my first transition from programming into game design, programming where you're like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you had this in the game? And then by the afternoon, you're prototyping and it's in the game, to feeling sort of like a sculptor with no hands, where you're like, hey guys, what do you think about this and something like that? Maybe, kind of put it in like this and bigger explosions and move that over there. Yeah, kind of like that. And you're just kind of building consensus and getting people excited about ideas and not actually implementing stuff in code like I used to. So that was a weird transition, but it was exciting. And then after that, I went through several game companies, from mobile games to casual games to console games. I did a startup that got acquired by Activision and was named Sierra Online. Not the Sierra Online from like the early 90s with the point and click adventures, but kind of V2 of that studio coming back. It was our studio, and we did a couple of games for them. That was pretty cool. And then I got really interested in casual games. I had a few friends from the old Monolith days who were doing casual games, and I didn't get it at all. I'm like, isn't that games for grandma? Like, how is that interesting at all? And little did I realize that there is nothing casual about the way that the people who enjoy those games play them. They play them all day long. They're just short session, and they're easy to pick up. They're just, some of them really deep, hard to master. But some of the folks who play those games play them for as many hours as the kids in who aren't in school play. Right? It's crazy, and they're also really juicy, which I like. And the production value is really high, and there's eye candy and things flying around the screen. And these are things that in traditional games kind of get prioritized down. Like the project managers on traditional games will, when you ask for something like, hey, can the menu like kind of slide in and have these cool effects and stuff? And they'll say, sure thing, man. That's like a priority 3 feature. Maybe we'll get to it if you have time. And casual games sort of just embodied that as their bread and butter, because there's so many of them. They're free, they're all free. And you have to hook people in like the first minute or two, where they'll just kind of, swipe left and you're out. So I loved that about casual games, being a user experience maxi myself. And I'm like, man, if I ever get back into AAA games, I am bringing the juice with me. Like you gotta have that. And so that was really exciting. I worked at Big Fish Games for a few years, working on some of their casual games. And then my last job before getting into Web3, apologize, this is taking so long. I'll get to the Web3 part, but was heading the design department at the Microsoft Casual Game Studio. So the studio manager, Paul Jensen, and I founded the studio to bring back the old games that used to come with Windows, like Solitaire and Minesweeper and Mahjong, and those classics that never really made any money. They didn't really have any sticky features, and they had a decent reach, but it just wasn't. They weren't modern at all. So I got to modernize all of those games, which was humbling, exciting, and super nerve-wracking. Like Solitaire, the most played game in history, like being able to revamp that was just the most awesome experience ever. But I didn't want to be known as the guy who ruined Solitaire. Like, oh my God, that would have been terrible. And but it did really well. The new Microsoft Solitaire got inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame in 2019, which I will never top that in my video game career moment, I'm sure. But hey, I still have to try. Like, for me, making video games is not a job. It's fun. So it's something I like to do in the evenings or on the weekends, and I'll do it long after I have the financial freedom to retire, just because I enjoy it so much, right? So it's like, I'm always going to do this until I can't for some reason. But I think it was my tech background that really got me interested in the Web3 and blockchain intersection. I was excited about this back in 2017 when I read the Bitcoin and the Ethereum white papers. And I'm like, holy crap, like this is going to be the technology that brings a whole new world of gaming experiences and business models and monetization and stuff you couldn't do, and digital property ownership, right? Like that got me so excited. And I went to talk to all of my veteran game developer and game designer friends. This is 2017, mind you. And the narrative at that time was blockchain. Oh man, trust me, you don't want to get involved with that. It's drug dealers and money launderers, and that's pretty much it. Like, so get out of that. Don't mess with that. And nobody from traditional games was interested. It was crazy. I'm like, how do you not see this? So I had to just kind of go over into the blockchain world and meet people. And of course, everybody in blockchain loved blockchain. They saw it as, the future of digital finance and digital property ownership and all kinds of games, but there's nobody who really knew games. You had your crypto kitties, and they're like, look what developers can do. And then as we got a little further, you got stuff like Axie Infinity, and they're like, look what business and finance people can do, right? But I'm like, where are the game designers? Where are the product people? Where are the user experience maxies like me who are out here like smacking their hands on their head when they see Connect Wallet on the front page of the experience? I'm like, come on, guys, we're not going to get like hundreds of millions of players with that experience. Let's do it right. And there just weren't any, right? So I don't know. I spent 2020 and 2021 talking to everybody who said game and blockchain in their bio or Discord or NFT project. I minted thousands of NFTs, and I talked to all the founders, and there really weren't any who I felt like shared my user experience first passion, except for one. It was the CEO of Coin Games. His name was Tim, and he of our studio now, and so we hit it off and kind of got the band back together, and then co-founded Coin Games with Brian, Mike, and I, the COO, CTO, myself, and Tim in sales, and we have an art director, and since then we've grown to about 15 or 17 people, and we're really excited about taking a gamer first experience to blockchain games. I think there's kind of two teams that you'll see building in this space right now. There's people who are native Web3, and they have a lot of money because they got in at the right time, and they may have even launched a project in 2021 and brought in a lot of cash. And now they're like, sweet, now we just have to use that cash to find good talent and get a game going here somehow. So let's throw cash at people and make a good game, because we understand Web3. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got a very small amount of Web2 studios who are getting past all the Kotaku articles, and they're like, I see something here, and we want to take a shot at it, but we don't really understand Web3, the culture or the audience or the needs of the people, because we just got here like 4 to 6 months ago. And I'm just this weird spot in the middle who's kind of been on both sides for so many years, and kind of have this deep understanding of both sides, like what the Web 2 gamer needs and what the Web 3 person needs. And so I'm excited to combine those in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my first questions, was like, exactly to your point of like basically two ways in, right? The Web 3 like way in, where you start out kind of with the more financial aspects, and then the Web 2 way in, where it's like you really have to start with the product and the game first. I guess if you had to choose like which one you think is going to be the more effective strategy, which would you sort of like go with?
I'm ear to ear grinning, because that's such an easy question. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that it's the customer experience first, right? Like, yes, and we've seen what happens when you use financial incentives, right? You get airdrops and blur farming and DeFi, huge APY, and you get a lot of people over there. But as soon as that drops down, which it always inevitably does, everybody just flocks to the next shiny thing, right? And you lose all your people. Like, if you don't have the customer experience that just knocks your socks off, you're not going to retain anybody. So it's really all about retention.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that intuitively makes a lot of sense. And I think I would love to hear your thoughts on like Bored Ape Yacht Club, since they seem to be like the prime example of going backwards from PFP. And then basically over the last like probably 3 months, they've kind of released another, 50,000, 60,000 NFTs. Like, do you think that's going to work? Like, they're starting to drop like like wearables, like in-game wearables, quote unquote, but there's no game yet. It's like kind of like a redeem later type coupon. What are your thoughts on what they're doing over there?
I think Yuga is awesome. So there's a reason why they're one of the number one brands in Web3. And I would say that one thing so they're great at marketing. Like, that's probably their biggest strength. Yeah. And one of the things that they really understand is a lesson that I've taken to heart, just being in Web3 for so long, is that you really have to have value flow through your holders, right? You got to be really careful, because you want to bring in new people, but you have to do so. Like, you've seen what happens when you're just like, hey, we're selling new stuff. Holders get a small discount and everybody else welcome, right? Like, you're not letting that value flow through your OGs, right? And it gets harder and harder to do that the more collections you have. You build up this, what I call collection debt, where you're like, okay, we got 10,000 of these and 5,000 of these and 20,000 of these and 10,000 of these, and everybody wants to feel special. That gets really hard, right? But Yuga has been managing that better than anybody. Like, they have several collections, and they're always bringing value to their holders in different, unique ways. And so they've been managing it, but man, it's tough. And now they're pivoting to user experiences, right? They have the other side, and they've got games, and their Dookie Dash mint was incredible. Like, it was like, hey, let's show you what it's like to mint an NFT, but rather than just, get on a whitelist, grind for it, get on pre-mint or whatever, we're going to let you play a product that we made purely for, to leaderboard you and let you mint. It's like a skill-based mint. That was awesome. Like, we need so much more of that. And it's fine. Like, everybody's like, but the game was just like a little web-based web runner. Like, it wasn't AAA quality, and it didn't need to be, right? Like, all you needed was a fun game experience to make a more interesting mint experience for an NFT, which is all it was meant to do. And for that, they crushed it.
If you had to place a bet on like what's going to be the first sort of like big Web3 gaming hit, would you kind of go towards more of like a casual category, or do you think like it really will be kind of like an MMO, a little bit more less casual, quote unquote, type of game?
In my opinion, the first big hit is not going to be a casual game. Like, the casual games are probably going to be one of the last, mass adoption to get here. I think the first ones are going to be the no-brainer genres that really map to ownership well. And these are things like trading card games, loot extraction shooters, and MMOs. Those are some of the biggest, most obvious ones that, like, wow, with true property ownership, these games will kill it. So I think those are the ones we're going to see. And, some games in that category right now are games like, Gods Unchained and Skyweaver and Parallel Alpha. And then in the loot extraction shooter, you've got Dead Drop and Shrapnel, for example, are going to be two, shots on goal there. I think some esports games could also be really interesting, like something that Wildcard is doing. That, like, they're really leaning into the esports direction. And so if there's a game that's good enough for true, like, world-class esports with high-level prizes and tournaments every year, like League of Legends, I think there's some really interesting things that Web3 can do between, like, the relationship of, like, the player, the viewer, the live streamer, the team, the promoter. Like, all of that ecosystem gets really interesting in Web3 when you can throw ownership of those pieces and parts around to people. So then I think after those kind of establish, hey, Web3 games aren't so bad, and we don't even call them Web3 games anymore, they're just games and they have ownership, right? Once we cross that threshold, I think that the mid-core and the casual games will really shine then. And now you're like, well, everybody wants to, because why would you play the ones that don't have that when there are games that do have interoperability, composability, ownership, and all that stuff?
I have a ton that I want, like a ton of threads and all of that I want to go down. But I'm just fire some questions before I forget or start forgetting. You talked about casual games, and you alluded a little bit to why you are interested in those, but could you expand on like what it is about the casual game and creating a casual game that's like the intellectual conquest for you? Like, what is it about? Because, to a layperson like myself, I would say, oh, building Call of Duty would seem more interesting than building Solitaire, right? So, but it sounds like there's some sort of like intellectual pursuit there, and I'm curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, casual games represents a wide range of genres from Solitaire to a game like Puzzle Quest or Gardenscapes or something that have a little more meat on the bones for like a gamer, right? And I think, casual games are just defined by their short sessions, right? Like, hey, games last, minutes, not half an hour, not measured in sections of hours, right? And they're easy to pick up. They're all very accessible, right? But they can be deep. I think that the more depth you have, the more they get into mid-core games, right? And so, like, did I run home to go play Solitaire after working on all day? No, it's not my personal kind of game that I prefer more hardcore games, or at least mid-core, like Clash Royale, Clash of Clans, Hearthstone. Those kind of games are more my style personally. But the things that casual games have going for them is the best ones are dripping with high production value. And a lot of AAA games, I mean, the best AAA games have that, but a lot of AAA game attempts are missing that, because they just like, well, we got so much work to do that the fit and finish is usually an afterthought on a lot of those games. And you can't not have that as a casual gamer. You'll just die by the side of the road kind of thing. And so for me, being a user experience maxi, that the user experience and the high production value and the quality just having to be so good, or you can't even make it. I just love that about casual games. So that was my favorite part of it. The games that we're working on now at Coin Games are going to be more mid-core, more like if Supercell were going to go full on into Web3, these are the kind of games they would make. That's where we're headed.
Okay, and this is a little bit like less of a thread pool. What's been like your favorite like gaming wave? Is it like mobile games? Are you still dreaming about like arcade days? Like what's been big console, like big box consoles?
As a player or as a game designer?
Let's say both.
As a player, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for, awesome, epic single player games like Breath of the Wild and God of War. And the bigger they get and the more expansive they get, with a lot of freedom to explore and find things, and with good combat and have puzzles. I love those games. They're big budget, and they're like, each time one of those comes out, I'm just like, I can't wait to get on the pre-sale and download and get that. And I guess also as a player, for me, I have a competitive side. So I really enjoy competitive games, but they're not the Twitch action first-person shooter games for me. They're more thinker games like Hearthstone and TCGs and card games and, chess type games, but with more meat than just, a couple pieces you put on the board. So I've really enjoyed those. And cooperative games are also really great, I would say. And there's been a lot more cooperative games now that you can have online games and you can cooperate with someone in a different place. And you don't have to have same couch co-op. The possibilities really open up. I mean, years ago, you wouldn't even think of building a game that required 2 or more people, or you can't play it. But now there are some, and they're pretty awesome. And the more games we have like that, because, connectivity is so easy, that's really exciting. I think as a game designer, I mean, I knew 5 years ago that my next career move was going to be a blockchain game. And I just didn't know how. It was about finding the right team and the right timing. And it took 5 years kind of for the world to catch up with the excitement around that. And I'd say we're still catching up. Like, there's a lot of mainstream gamers and game developers who still are very either toxic to skeptical of this space. And they're still like, I'll believe it when I see it. But right now I don't like what I see over there. And that's totally fair. But I would say as a game developer, like, the blockchain game intersection is beyond exciting to me. I'm like, okay, I just want to try to crack this code and combine everything that I've learned. And the social side of Web3 really is also really exciting. Like, you're building with a community. You're not building for a group of customers, and it's inherently social. Like, I think blockchain games that are extremely single player aren't really taking advantage of the ownership. Like, it's kind of like, if you have a really cool thing and no one else can see it, how cool is it? I mean, and it's fine. Like, you have art at home and you really love your art and some of your collectibles, but it's even that much more exciting when someone can say, is that a Monet? Holy crap, where did you get that? Oh, that's so cool, right? You want to share that with other people. And so I think Web3 games are inherently social. And what a great time when everybody's just got so much screen time to make social games. So I don't know if I answered your question, but those are some of the things that excite me the most.
No, you did. And that brings us to a good point. The community aspect of a game, like, you kind of have two products now, right? You have this game and a community. And it seems like the obvious route would be like to get some Web3 native person to kind of help run that community for you. Is that what you guys are doing, or how are you guys approaching?
Well, we are fairly we have a few Web3 natives who have been there for years. So we feel like we have that. Like we know we're 1 to 2 degrees from almost every major game or blue chip project in Web3, because we've been in the space so long. We know people, and we like to collaborate. And so we are not like going to hire a Web3. We're going to collaborate with Web3 experts, of course, and Web3 influencers and Web3 content creators. And we will be hiring a community management team when the time comes. But, I think the difference between a Web3 game and a Web2 game is you don't spin up the community until the very, very end of a Web2 game. End meaning like when you're about to ship it, like a couple months before launch. And that's the time when you're like, all right, we need a content plan if it's a service-based game, or a community plan with beats and events and things like that. But you don't have to do any of that until the game is pretty much done. And in Web3, you have to do that as soon as you like open the floodgates to your Discord and you start to sell in-game items and things like that. And if you do that like 2 years before launch, and then you just go dark building, like they're going to be like, why is there nothing to do here? Just like the community would be if you didn't release any expansions on a game for 2 years, or like content's getting kind of stale, guys. So you really have to think of it differently. I like your observation about it's kind of like two products, because it really is. You really have like, I think community management is very underrated in Web3 right now. Like a lot of people will say, oops, we didn't realize we needed this much to do, or this many things, or, well, we don't have it. I guess we shouldn't have sold our stuff so early. Like there's a lot of people running into that in Web3 gaming right now. So our plan is, when we do open the floodgates, to have a strong community team and a plan to where, even though the game may not be releasing for whatever months or whatever, we have a nice plan for cool things for the community to do, and to engage with the development team as we're building the game, so that we're not just dark and we'll call you in a year or two, guys.
Just switching gears a little bit, one thing you mentioned, a nice concept of interoperability. And, so many people have classic examples of, cool items that they might have, discovered in World of Warcraft that they can't take over to like another game or things like that. Do you think like interoperability is kind of like a realistic future? Just thinking about companies wanting to kind of like own their sort of like turf or environment in a way. Like, for example, like would Coin Games ever build something for other side, right? Knowing that like Yuga kind of wants to be the interoperable center of the metaverse, but if other companies are like, no, I think we'd rather actually build in our own sandbox, like, then that kind of idealistic future won't exist, right? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. And it is the big one, I think, because I think that, we've seen you can sell it as the embodiment of what it means to own something. And everybody is like, oh, I totally get that. Just like my magic cards or my collectibles in real life. That's so cool. I can sell it. And that's pretty much the only slice of ownership that we've seen in Web3 games so far leaned into. And it's great because everybody understands that. They're like, yeah, I own this, so I can sell it when I'm done with the game, or if I want to make some money on the side, cool. I get really excited about some of the other prongs of ownership, which are, you can use it to create something, you can destroy it, you can give it away, you can let somebody borrow it, you can build on it, and you can take it out of the game. That's the most exciting one to me. You're like, what does it mean to take something out of the game? Doesn't that mean that someone else has to do something for you? But that's where you get into interoperability and composability. And I remember in like 2021, 2020, when I first heard the concept of interoperability, the narrative that was going around was, it's great. You can have your sword in World of Warcraft, and if they ever shut down the servers, you still have your sword, and it'll still do great things in the next game. And that's not really practical, because as any game developer will tell you, a game developer wants to make their own economy with their own items and their own art style. And they're not just going to take a sword from another game with all its stats and all its function and even its render style, and it's going to fit perfectly into your game. Like, that's very low probability, and I don't even think anybody wants to do that. But what is interesting is that the ownership of that sword could give you a perk in the new game, or that sword could compose into something else, like a different item entirely, like a swordsman's club pass, or like it doesn't have to be the same thing, but the metadata associated with it could grow, and there could be stories that on that item, like this sword cleaved over 3,000 orcs, and you participated in the major tournaments, and you top 10'd them, and that's all on the sword, which follows you around. That the sword has the story on it now, and that those stories can provide you interesting things in other games. So I do think interoperability is realistic, and nobody's hit it yet. And one of the reasons why it's so hard is because it takes at least 2 products to light that experience up, right? Like, okay, so I've got this item, and you're telling me it's going to do something later, but show me the later, right? Like, I need to see that to understand it. And because it takes 2 products and we don't have one AAA Web3 game yet, it's going to be a little while before we have really lit that up. But that's actually one of our goals at Coin Games, is to do that. And it's why, even though we're starting with 1 game, our plan is to build 3 games with interoperable, composable content to really light that experience up in a way that we can curate. So we're not cannibalizing our audience. We're instead just saying, here's like 3 standalone games that you can play completely by themselves, and they stand up to their Web 2 counterparts in every way. And they are enhanced if you play more than one of them each in different, unique ways. So we're kind of excited about that. But you asked another question, like, why would anybody want to build for another game when they could just build for themselves? I think the theory is that, user acquisition in Web 2 games, especially mobile right now, is highly busted, right? Like, you can't, it's very difficult to target ads and find the people you want to reach, and because everybody can opt out of that, and it's so hard to target people and acquire users for your game. And Web3 offers a really interesting way to do that. I don't know if it's going to replace it, or if it will just enhance it, or if it will die on the vine. I'm not sure. But the whole thing about building a community of, creators and people who love your game and loyal followers who want to evangelize your game and bring other people in because they're excited about it is a neat slice on user acquisition. And so that's where collaboration comes in. Because if you say, hey, let's collaborate with Yuga, and there are lots of ways to do that. We can build something for them. They can build something for us. We could just do an IP crossover, or we could take their holders and have them get perks in our games by composing that stuff into our world. Maybe they'll do the same for us. Maybe they won't. But it's a neat way to say, like, hey, if you like this game, you'll probably like ours. Come check it out. And you can have several tiers of depth of those kind of collaborative partnerships. So I don't see it as fully cannibalistic. Although it could be if you're not careful.
Totally. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And like, just hearing you describe some of like those potential use cases and future mechanics kind of makes me realize on a very small and primitive scale, we're kind of playing with those mechanics a little bit, where it's like, you'll see, Bored Ape holders get allow list for this next project, right? That's like a key way to tap in that community. Or if you burn this NFT, you can redeem this new NFT, which is also kind of like potentially that idea of like, if you want to burn this sword from your one game, you could claim this new sword in this new game. So it's kind of interesting, because I feel like on a very primitive level, we're kind of like playing with those mechanics a little bit.
Yeah, I hear a lot of Web3 people talking about burning in specific. And I think if that's your own ecosystem, it makes sense. But you have to be careful. Like, NFTs have emotional value, right? You're like, they have stories now. Like, a sword in World of Warcraft that you don't own may have, and some of them have quite a bit of value. Like some of the ones you have to go on epic quests for and get raids together, and they take you a month to get them. Like some of those have story value and emotional connection too. But like, think about your favorite PFP, and being forced to be like, well, do I take the profit on this and get rid of it and get out of the ecosystem? Do I burn it for this other cool thing that I want? Like, I kind of don't want to do that if I have any kind of emotional connection to it. So it makes sense for game items where that was the intended use for it. Like, well, you want to destroy this to upgrade into a better thing, and you don't have any emotional connection to it because it's a material, it's a crafting material, or it's something that was designed to be, thrown away, then it's fine. But you have to be careful. I see projects being like, hey, burn your PFP and get a whitelist or get some cool stuff because these things are low value, but they may be low ETH value, but they may be high emotional value. And so you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like I have like one of my first characters from World of Warcraft, and it's only level 32, but I definitely have like an emotional connection to my Tauren druid. So
yeah, definitely. I have so many. I had not playing WoW. I kicked the habit, but I put my /played is probably pretty crazy, and I really enjoyed that game. And it would have been so great to have anything like that. Game is now on the shelf for me, and just like every other game that's on the shelf for me, which are thousands of them, there's nothing that came with those games. There's nothing that followed me except for I have stories in my head that I can tell people and regale people with tales and stories of the games and the times that were so great. But there's nothing to show for it, and that's a problem. All that sunk time and sunk cost. That's one of the things that excites me about the blockchain intersection is it could provide a new experience around that.
Renting or playing a game right now is like the renting economy, right? Like you live in an apartment or something, you have nothing to show for all of the money you spent and the years and years of like living expenses. And we've added like home ownership now. It's pretty cool. So what's your favorite blockchain to build on or build a game on? Or which one do you think is going to win that race?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't have a favorite blockchain. I am chain agnostic personally. I like all of them. I think all of them could be great, and it's really just a matter of where the customers are for us, which today is an Ethereum-based chain, whether it's layer 1 or layer 2. But a year from now, it could be anything. It could be one of the other layer 1s. It could be some crazy chain we haven't heard of yet. And on the one hand, you could say chain doesn't matter. Like if the game is great, then people will go play it. And that is true. Like people bought a CD-ROM drive back in the 90s because a game came out called The Seventh Guest. And it was so amazing that you had to buy this piece of hardware just to be able to play it. And people did that. And I think the same will be true in blockchain games, right? If a game is so good and it's on Cardano, like it doesn't matter. Everybody will have a Cardano wallet by the end of the day because you have to go play that. But I think, like I said, because Web3 games are so inherently social and there's a little bit of, like the ownership means something, and you want to show off your stuff to people and you want people to be able to see that stuff, not just in the game, but outside the game. You want to be able to take that to other cool places. It's like, how many connection points do you have? Well, if you're on an orphan chain with one amazing game and nothing else, that interoperability is going to be a hard sell. Whereas if you're somewhere where like, well, everybody's here and there's hundreds of thousands of games here, the chances of having a cool interoperability story are going to be higher. So I think it does matter. It does matter a little bit.
Okay, that's fair. Let's dig into that point though, because that triggered a thought. You said that if the game's so good, people will go out and buy the hardware regardless, right? And I talked to a lot of like game developers and stuff, and it seems like the onboarding process is the real pain right now, and like getting new users. And you kind of alluded to this earlier with like the Connect wallet in the top right and how that's a horrible UX design. But if what you say is true, which is like the game, it just has to be the game. It is so fun. People will do whatever it takes to play the game. Like, doesn't that mean like the onboarding process like kind of is a like tier 2 factor? And it's like, this seems like to be the excuse everybody gives, right? This is why I'm asking this. And it's like, well, it seems like from what you just said, maybe that doesn't matter.
So it is a barrier to entry. And if the game is so amazingly good, if it's the next Fortnite, if it's the next Call of Duty, the next World of Warcraft, people will break down those barriers. You won't get as many people breaking them down as you would if they weren't there. So it is a barrier. And I do think it matters. Like, I don't think it's a non-issue. It's only going to be a non-issue for like 1% of the games, right? Every other game, it is a big deal. But I see it as a super easy solvable problem, right? Like, as a user experience maxi, the solution to this problem is just make it zero barrier to entry. So don't tell people it's a blockchain game. Don't require people to have a wallet. Have it be seamless. Hide the fact that it's on the blockchain, not intentionally. Like, I made a tweet once and say the solution is bury the blockchain, and I had a lot of blockchain maxis flame me for that. And they're like, "What? What are you even in Web3 for, bro? If you're going to bury the blockchain, that's the whole point of the space. Get out of here with that." But that wasn't what I meant. I just meant from the user experience standpoint, it's not important. Like, how many people highlight we're an AWS game or an Azure game? It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. So bury it from the first class citizen on the user experience, and like Top Shot did, right? Like when you used NBA Top Shot, nobody even knew. Most of the people who were buying those moments didn't realize that, oh, those are on a blockchain. You paid for them with your credit card, you had them on the website, and there they were. And that was pretty cool. And you could show them to other people, and oh, those are on the Flow blockchain. I didn't even know that, right? Like, that's the experience you need. You just play our game. It's free. Yeah, there's a wallet, but you didn't know it. We have it for you. And then when you're ready to take control of it, you link your own wallet and everything moves there, or you withdraw to your own wallet. And so I see it as a full custody experience for people who don't understand blockchain, with an option to move to self-custody whenever you want, kind of thing. Like,
so you guys are gonna build your own wallets?
We don't want to build our own wallets, but we want to use a third party that has all of that and a great experience. And either we'll have to skin it, or
is it like Sequence?
Yeah, like we're looking at those guys like Sequence, Fireblocks, Stardust, a lot of those wallets that are like, hey, we want to take the pain of onboarding out of the user's hands, but we just want to make sure that when they're ready to red pill over to Web3, and the maxis are going to go, how do I connect my wallet? Like, we have a nice answer to that whenever they're ready for it.
Got it. What are your thoughts on like in-game currencies? Like, do you foresee yourself using those, or is it going to be strictly NFTs?
Do you mean Web3 tradable tokens, or do you just mean like, yeah, you do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think they work for some games and are not necessary for others. I think they can work. So, but the days of we're doing a token, so token value can go up and you can stake it, and that's pretty much it. I think those days are past. So if you're going to have a token, it's got to be a compelling reason. And if you're building an ecosystem of games, I think a token makes a lot of sense to be the global, currency of trade for that. You just have to be really careful that since it's an open economy on that token, you have to be really careful with the faucets and the sinks for it. You probably either you make it infinite supply and it turns out like SLP, or you make it fixed supply and you just have to manage the economy really carefully. And you probably have to pair it with an off-chain token, because I don't think a game can survive on just an ERC20 tradable token. There might be some, DeFi kind of game. Like maybe a game like EVE Online could survive with something like that, a heavy finance economy driven game. But for your average AAA game, I think you probably need off-chain currency as well as an optional on-chain currency if you have one. We're still deciding that, but it's looking like we have a pretty good story to support having a token in our ecosystem, with strong utility and consumptive utility to have demand for it. And it's not so token number can go up. It's because it helps move our economy across multiple games in ways that would be more difficult with a Web2, with an off-chain currency. You can do some things with it you couldn't do as easily with off-chain currencies.
So how do you deal with the problem of like presenting your users with that currency? Like throughout the game, right? Like what would they need it for? They probably can't buy it from you guys.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have to send them somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, so one way to look at it as, is that there are two kinds of people playing Web3 games today. There are people who are financially motivated and they want to just play to earn, and they want number to go up, and they want extracting a value. And maybe they kind of like games, but their primary motivation is number go up. And then you got people who just want to play great games, as we've been doing for decades, with no expectation of value, and they just want good experiences. And bonus if my Black Lotus is worth something, years down the road. Cool, but that's not why I'm here. And we see it as there are many more of the second category than there are of the first category, right? But the first category is interesting because they can drive large amounts of spend, right? Like they're kind of like your Web 2 game, your free to play game has its whales and its minnows, and the minnows make up the larger number, but the whales make up a lot of the revenue, right? And Web 3 can kind of offer that whale experience on steroids. And a lot of them are financially motivated right now, but it's super risky and has been proven to fail if you try to blend the financially motivated people with the fun motivated people in the way that Axie Infinity did. And it's just like, hey, come on in, play to earn. Everybody can earn, right? It's like, no, you can't. Like, that's impossible mathematically, economically, and motivationally. You don't want to blend those. You kind of want to be like, hey, you're here for fun, go over here. Hey, you're here for financial motivation, go over here. And so we're going to try to build an experience that appeals to both, with a little fence in between them so that they're not blurred. And the people who are financially motivated are going to have to interact with more like a protocol than the game kind of thing, right? Because like you said, you can't sell things with an expectation of profit to anybody. In fact, you can't create those things or you get into trouble with the SEC and all that stuff. So the market has to do all of that. And that's fine. And you just build protocols that have opportunities for people to own things and then hand it over and see what happens kind of thing. And there are a lot of games and protocols that are doing that, and that's pretty exciting. But you don't try to blend that with the I'm here for fun experience, or you get into trouble. Because when you play for fun, you kind of get a dopamine rush. You're like, this game is awesome. And then I come home and I can't wait to play it. And I'm excited to think about it and do research online. And you're getting different psychological benefits from that than you are for getting cash, right? And as soon as you experience getting cash for something, that kind of takes over as your motivation, and just like moving to a harder drug, you can't just be like, well, the cash isn't here anymore, I'm just going to go back to playing for fun. It's cool. Like, you can't really go back. So you don't want to combine those. You got to be really careful.
How strong do you think that funnel is going to be, like from fun to cash? Because like once they realize, oh, I could have made money for that. Like, do you think they're going to start converting?
I think good games can prevent that. Like, I think Magic the Gathering is probably one of the best examples of this. They've been running for decades, since the 90s, right? They have a secondary market where some of their cards sell for tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, very similar to NFTs, right? Yet, how come they don't say play to earn? How come 90% of the people don't even know about the secondary market? They just have cards sitting on their shelf in a closet, right? It's because the game was designed in such a way that, yes, there are people who have that financial motivation, and they'll crack packs and throw away the commons and flip rares on eBay, and that's all they do. And then there's a hybrid of people who play and sleeve their cards and collect so they can sell them someday. But the 90% of players are just there for fun, and they buy the expansions every time they come out. That's the game you have to design, and that's what the future of a Web3 game will look like, in my opinion. Same distribution of people with motivations. Yes, there will be a secondary market because the game is good. Yes, there will be a small percentage of people who are flipping and have financial motivation. That's fine. The market takes care of that. But most of the people are there for fun, and they're not converted, as you say, to that side because they just don't see it, or it's too much trouble, or it's not in front of them, or it's just not something that interests them.
So then would you guys take a similar approach, like from a back end business perspective, and let the market build that secondary market? Are you guys going to supply a secondary market that you run and take some rake?
I think the market, I mean, we're not going to build an earn component, right? Like we're not going to build a play to earn product, right? Anything that offers any kind of rewards are either going to be community or protocol owned, or they will be, and who builds the protocol, right? Like that's a collaboration between multiple studios and community members and things like that. And it kind of has to be that way because it's you have to be very careful otherwise. So we're still looking at how to appeal to that other side of the fence, the smaller but higher financially motivated side of the fence, while staying fully within legal compliant guidelines and all of that good stuff. Fortunately, we have a really great blockchain attorney crew on our side who's working with a lot of other big Web3 games and other products that are out there. They're one of the best in the space, so we're excited to have them on our side to navigate these gray area regulation. Like if there were no regulation, you would probably just build something that rev shares with people. But I think that that's dangerous for a lot of reasons, not just because regulation is out there, but actually the motivation reasons I talked about. You don't want to build a product that everybody sees the carrot of cash dangled in front of them and then moves over there and then gets disappointed with the game when the cash dries up because the game was actually good, but now they don't care. So, even if regulation said, go wild, rev share, profit share, it's all fine, you probably wouldn't want to do that anyways, just because people's motivations would shift and it would be hard to sustain that.
That makes sense. Switching gears a little bit, I'm curious, why do you think gamers just hate NFTs so much? Like, it seems like we're trying to, create a world where they get something for the time that they've spent and like ownership and all these great benefits. But they just seem to like really hate the idea. Like, what are your thoughts?
It is such a head breaker when you present it that way. You're like, don't you want to own your stuff? Doesn't it suck when you sell something for $100 on Steam and your money can't ever come out of the system? Like, don't you want to have things go with you? Like, it's such an obvious no-brainer, but yes, there is a lot of toxicity, and I've been right in the face of it for years as I've been trying to evangelize the space to game developers and gamers, and getting reactions that range from, why don't you sell cigarettes to children while you're at it, you terrible person, to I don't like what I see when I look over in that space and you're no different. So now I think there's a little bit more intrigue because we're starting to see the first beginnings of AAA games come out. So part of it is the quality of the games has been low. And when people look over at the space, they see that. Part of it was the play to earn riff that went off for a while, and people saw this financialization of games and they're like, that's dirty, right? Like, we've played games for decades without expecting that, and you're trying to make it all about money, and that's not why you play games. You play games for fun. So get out of my house with that financial motivation thing. But also, like, people like us who are Web3 native, we've had years and years to curate all of the stuff off of our feed that's like, 100x, go to the moon, buy random coin, you'll be rich tomorrow. We're like, we know how to curate that away, right? But the people who haven't been Web3 native, they'll read some headline about some NFT and they're like, all right, maybe I should check this out. So they'll like Google it up and land on some YouTube channel that's got one of those crazy, altcoin, super high supply, super low market cap, add a zero, get rich tomorrow. They land in that lion's den and they're like, ugh, this is just super grimy. And there's so much grift and greed over here. And that's what they see. And then you got the media in traditional gaming just reinforcing that. There's so much grift. There's so much greed. There's so much financialization. There are no good games. Like, that is the story. It's destroying the environment. Like, all of those narratives, it's just, people rally around those because there are no counter examples. And I would always get, all right, can you show me a game that's doing it right? So I can, like, the way you talk about it is different than what I see. It's intriguing. Show me one. And I'm like, I can't show you one right now because they're still being built, but in 2 to 3 years, there'll be some great, shots on goal. And they're like, all right, well, I guess I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm highly skeptical, right? And that's where we are right now. The skepticism is changing because there's a lot of people building games. And I was at the Game Developers Conference this year. And, in game development media, you don't talk about blockchain games because, you got your Kotakus and people who hate them. And so I figured there'd be nothing. There'd be no Web3 presence at the Game Developers Conference. And there wasn't much in the sessions and the tracks and teach you how to build them because nobody's really done it yet. But when you went to the expo floor, I saw something like 1 in 10 or 15 booths was a Web3 booth, and that was like insane. And I'm like, holy crap, this is a takeover. Like, the blockchain games are coming in large numbers, and nobody's talking about it. Like, I mean, well, we are all talking about it, but in traditional games, nobody's talking about the massive influx of talent to this space. And I'd say it's only 1 to 2 years max before we've cracked into mainstream.
I guess like, why hasn't like a game just like given free NFTs to like their players? Like, I don't know what an example would be, but like someone, if you've been playing Call of Duty for 5 years, it's like, we're actually just going to give you an NFT, like sign into your Activision account, and then you can take a look at it. And there's also a marketplace, just kind of like the way Reddit did it, where it's like,
Yep.
They had their avatars, they didn't have to buy it, so it didn't seem like a cash grab. Yep. And I think everyone just got super excited because they're like, oh, I have these cool little avatars, and people seem to want it, and they're paying for it. Why hasn't a game studio like done that?
A few reasons. And Reddit, the Reddit example you gave, I was about to say, like Reddit. And you're like Reddit. They have such a great playbook for that. It's kind of hard to argue with free stuff, even if you hate it. And then you realize it's not so bad. And I'm kind of pilled into this. I think the reason that game studios haven't done it are 2 reasons. I mean, Ubisoft tried to bring NFTs to what was a Ghost Recon or one of their big IPs, and they just got crapped all over by the community. And they realized, holy crap, let's back off from this, because they don't understand the spirit of Web3. The spirit of Web3 is that you do things collaboratively with your community, right? And when you just do a PR announcement of like, hey, we're adding NFTs to our game, isn't that awesome? It feels like to the community, you're jamming them down our throats. And that is not the approach that you want to do. If a Web2 company is going to embrace Web3, you have to do it collaboratively with the community. You can't just PR announce it and say we're selling NFTs or even giving away NFTs. I mean, maybe giving them away, but it's very delicate, right? And so there's all this headline risk for any game with a strong IP right now, and people are seeing the wasteland of Ghost Recon and Ubisoft and all these other games and all the toxicity from Kotaku and all that, and it's going, do we even want to give them away for free? Like, we're risking damaging our brand right now, right? Not to mention, what if there's a regulation? What if we're offsides on regulation by even doing that? Are we allowed to? We don't know. So I think the headline risk and the regulatory risk and the toxicity that are out there is the only thing standing in the way for game studios giving away free NFTs, to your point of very low risk from the experience standpoint. Like, what could go wrong? It's not on the experience side, it's on the other sides. Why? So I think Web 2 studios are more looking, that are open to this space, are looking to spawn off like sister studios that can take that headline risk away from their big brands they don't want tarnished, and could, even if there's a regulatory concern, it's another entity at that point that can take that risk. You just have to be really careful. So like Square Enix seems to be diving in pretty heavy, and that's exciting. But I think a lot of the Western big AAA studios are going to be lagging a little bit behind, just to see where regulation lands.
From a corporate perspective, would game studios, like big Web2 game studios, would they rather build their own blockchain game or like acquire one that is doing well?
That's a great question. I can't speak for every game studio. I think it just depends on how knowledgeable they feel like they can be, right? Like, if you feel like there's something here, but you just have zero expertise, you look to acquire a studio and then have that be your blockchain arm, especially if you have the luxury of waiting and seeing if this, goes the way of the dodo or actually succeeds. Then if it looks like it's going to succeed, you just throw cash at a studio and you acquire one. I think that's a really solid business plan for a big corporate Web 2 studio. But then you get to the more mid-tier studios who are a little bit more nimble, and they might want to take a shot on goal themselves if they have the expertise to do it. Maybe creating if they have strong brands, they may want to, create a sister, another entity to do it. I know some Web 2 studios who are doing that. They made great games, and now they're starting a new company, like an offshoot brand, to build a blockchain game. I know a lot of them that are doing that. And I imagine a lot of the big AAA studios have their eye on this space, and they're just like, cash in hand, ready to go if something looks amazing. So I think you'll see both.
Yeah, that's my expectation, is like why some of them haven't made harder
Well, they
dives
don't need
into
to. They're doing great
it.
right now without having to go here. But I'm certain that everyone is at least intrigued with this space.
Can you steel man the argument for like why games shouldn't be on blockchain?
I think the argument for why games shouldn't be on blockchain is, especially if you take a games on blockchain or only on blockchain because of some kind of financial economic tie-in. And if you take that approach, then the reasoning is pretty solid. Like, games don't need that. They haven't needed them for decades, and they don't need them now. So, and from the studio perspective, why would you ever want to share any profit with the community or the players, or the content creators, when you can just take 100% of those profits and keep cranking out great games? That's why you would not want to go to blockchain, because you have a winning formula in Web 2, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
So Roblox, basically.
Yeah, Roblox, Fortnite. Like let's embrace the things that are kind of cool about Web3, like Fortnite with their creator tool set, and now they have a metaverse where people can create for it and make cool things, and that's pretty exciting. Why does it need to be on blockchain? Right. That is like, why do you need to own your stuff? I think is the steel man. Like I don't see the value in that. Like we can allow you to sell it in our marketplace. We don't have to own it for that. And if selling is the only value of ownership, then we got you covered. Steam Marketplace does that today. I don't know. How did that? I mean, I can respect.
I think it totally. I think it totally makes sense.
Go too hard?
No, I think it totally makes sense. But I think like the fact that, to be honest, like it actually makes me a little bit more bullish, because the fact that the steel man is like, it's working perfectly as is, and why would we ever want to share profits with anyone else, is exactly why it's going to get disrupted. Because it's like, it's just too set up for an incumbent. And I don't know, I just wouldn't bet against innovation. It's like whenever someone's like, if you're ABC, Fox, whatever, before Netflix came out, you're like, why would we change anything? Our studio's working great. We sell ads. It's working great. Like, people just watch on our schedule. I don't know. It's just, whenever I hear something like that, I'm like, oh, that's going to be like a great time for something new.
I mean, it was kind of the same thing that we saw in the 90s with free-to-play games. Like, I remember having arguments with people, and I was just getting into game development at that time, but there were people who were incumbent in the space, and they were like, let me tell you something. A game that is free will never be as good as one you have to pay $50 for, because you've got no time, you've got no commitment to learn how to play it and get into it. And in order to make money as a business, you have to use predatory mechanics, and the game just won't be as deep and as fun. So like, those free games will never compare to the experience, the value and the business model of a pay-to-play game. And that was in the 90s, and you can see where we are today and how that played out, right? And so I think there's some similarities there from that perspective.
Yeah, totally. And that actually kind of sparks like another question I had for you, since you're like so deep in like the gaming space, is just around when it comes to like casual games or free to play games, there are kind of like those behavioral, psychological, I don't know what the right word is, but there are kind of like little tricks, right? Where you kind of like incentivize and create little ladders. Is that like what's your perspective on that? And is that like a real element of game design? Like, in terms of, and now I'm just curious, like a peek behind the curtain, like, are there terms for it, like breadcrumbing, or, like as me not having seen like behind the curtain of the mechanics, like what kind of like popular tricks of the trade or tactics are there?
Yeah. I mean, that's your Web 2 game economy has lots of tricks like that. And it depends on the kind of game. If you're a subscription game or an ad-based game or a freemium game, there are lots of tricks that you employ. And I say tricks, but I don't mean yes, they elicit a certain psychological response in humans, and people love that. And with great power comes great responsibility, because now that you can get inside the heads of your players and manipulate how they feel about things, you can use that for good or evil, right? You can use that for good and provide an awesome experience that they can't wait to log into tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Or you could use that for evil and try to extract as much cash value from them as possible. And it's very important to have both the good and the evil side on a team as peers. Because if everybody reports to the monetization guy, then you've got an evil DNA and that's going to lead everything. And you're going to feel that predatory kind of extraction experience. But to contrast that, if you've got your design guy at the leadership and everybody reports into them, then, the game might leave money on the table, but you're going to have an awesome retention, an awesome experience. So the best organizations I've seen are where those two entities are peers to each other at the executive leadership level of a company. And if you have that, you have the business side, you have the design side, peer to peer, balancing it out, you get an amazing result.
Super cool. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good way to think about it. Kind of the yin and the yang.
It's funny, like I know some game designers at Blizzard and I know some business folks at Blizzard, and the business folks are like, we tell the game designers, don't even concern yourself with the monetization, with the money. Don't just give us the best possible experience, and then we will try to meet with you guys and get in the middle, right? And so their designers aren't allowed to think about the business side, which is pretty crazy. I've actually enjoyed making that transition from like, I'm a user experience DNA. So like, gun to my head, I'm going to lean to the user experience every time, but I've enjoyed picking up the business side over the years. And like, I'm intrigued with the balance of those two things and like putting on the business hat and then turning it around and playing both sides of that. It's pretty cool. But I respect Blizzard's like, there are skiers and there are snowboarders on the mountain. Get out of my way, but you can both be here, kind of thing.
That's a good analogy. I hadn't thought about like an organizational analogy, like skiers and snowboarders. Okay, real quick, let's get out of games really quickly and go deep into NFTs. Are you collector?
Oh yeah,
speculator?
I've been in NFTs since late 2020. So yeah, mint.
What was your foray into NFTs?
Probably NBA Top Shot back at the end of 2020. And I thought it's really funny because I thought they were really stupid at first. I'm just like, why are people paying for MP4s? Like, you can just right click, save them, right? Like, I went through all of that, right? Why are people buying these JPEGs that are horrible art? Like, what is going on here? And then, I don't know, one day it clicked for me. Wait a minute. They're not buying the JPEG. They're not buying the MP4. They're buying the proof of ownership of a thing. And the JPEG or the MP4 is just the candy coating that is around that, right? And I'm like, and it's expandable. That's interesting. Holy crap. It's just digital ownership. That's all it is. And that's really exciting. And as we spend more time online and owning something and proving it is pretty cool. Like, fast forward 100, maybe 200 years from now, where we have Star Trek holodeck level technology, and you're just like, coffee, and it just prints it right there, right? Like, when you have that, and I can print a thing, a Monet or a painting or whatever, and the human eye will not be able to tell the original from the copy because we can't anymore. It's literally perfect. The only thing that will matter is the digital signature, right? Like, it's the only way you'll be able to tell things apart. So we're going to need something like that, right? So we're going to need a source of truth.
People already talk about that with AI, right? Just to distinguish between whatever AI creates, what we create. So yeah, basically exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So real quick, were you like a basketball card collector or something? Or sports card collector?
I guess that? I always enjoyed collecting. So I enjoyed trading card games because I liked the collecting aspect in addition to playing with them. I always hated how you had to get them dirty and put them in these hard sleeves, and you're shuffling these hard plastic things just to keep them safe so you could have them in pristine condition. I hated having to wreck the condition of my collectibles to use them. But I enjoyed collectibles that you can use way more than collectibles that just sat on the shelf that you looked at. Like gaming collectibles were just perfect. And so I was looking for gaming collectibles or collectibles with utility, and there really weren't any at the beginning. It was PFPs and stuff. That was cool. There were still some nice ones. And I remember thinking, the art has to be good. I'm sick of all this crappy art. So I passed on some embarrassing projects. Like I passed on Punks, I passed on Apes, because that was my phase of the art has to be jaw-dropping good or I'm out. And I since have changed that. But like that was the phase that I went through at the time. And that's why I bought Clone X, because Clone X, I'm like, finally, really beautiful, high-quality PFP art. They look gorgeous. I have to get some of these.
Nice. So what was your like first PFP?
The first PFP that I felt comfortable using to represent myself was Clone X, but that was like a year into NFTs. I had collected a lot of PFPs before that, but I wasn't comfortable. Like, this is not who I'm not ready to represent myself with this for potentially years. Because I see a PFP as something you don't change every week. I see it as something that's a brand. It's kind of like, this, I got a vibe with that. This is who I am. And I figured when I minted a Clone X, like I looked through the options of what you could get, and I'm like, I'm probably going to get some crazy weird demon with a tongue coming out of his ear. And like, I'm probably not going to vibe with that, but it'll be cool to have. And then I minted one with like black spiky hair and yellow eyes and a halo and an angel. And I'm like, geez, that's a really good fit for me. Like, it just happened to be a perfect match for a vibe for me. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be a forever PFP for me.
Nice. What did you have as your PFP before the Clone X?
Yeah, I used my real face and real name because I was like, yes, we're in blockchain, but I feel like there's a trust gap here. So I want to put my reputation, my face, and everything on the line with everything I say or do. And that was seen as very, very not suspicious, questionable, very questionable by the Web3 community. They're like, bro, are you sure you want to do that? And I even, like, this is so crazy because I would go into some Discords and I'm minting stuff. And so I had a Discord PFP for a game I had worked on in the past. It was like a little, a character from the Disney Fairies game. I used Silver Mist, which was the little, one of the Lucy Liu played this character in the Disney Fairies game, and I liked that character. So I used that as a PFP in Discords when I wasn't ready, until I was ready to do Web3. And I remember people saying, I don't usually talk to people that don't have a blue chip NFT profile pic, but you seem like a cool guy. And that was just such a weird thing. I'm like, really? Like, there's a culture where you won't befriend someone unless they're one of us, with one of the, that bordered on cultish, right? And it was really weird. But I'm like, hey, I'm who I am. I'm Kevin. I'm doxed. I'm going to be that way. I think that's the future of anyone who's going to be building in this space. And so let me lead by example. And for a while it was really dicey, and now I think more people are doing it and it's cool. But yeah, so I was just my name and my face before that.
I don't know if you ever saw that like tweet that some Bored Ape tweeted out. It got really popular, it became copy pasta, but it was like, if you don't have a 6-figure PFP, don't, like, unfollow me.
Don't even at me. Yeah, I remember.
That reminded me.
Yeah, that really was kind of like, that's the meme that represents the extreme side of this space, the PFP space. And we all laughed at that and memed it up, but like from the traditional Web 2 side, they're like, yep. They're like, that is everything we hate about that space.
But you see that in the art space, right? You see that in for people who are really into cycling, are like super pretentious. Like, you see that in snowboarders, skiers, right? Like, you can't even do that black diamond. Like, I don't want to go with you up on the mountain.
It's true.
Thing.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
I feel like it's in everything. So I don't know. I thought it was actually a good signal, as like how sticky this is, rather than, oh, that's kind of gross,
like, I mean, there's always going to be this luxury side of digital ownership, for sure. And there will be pretentious arrogance that comes with that. And that's fine. I mean, just like there are with cars, and like you said, all of the enthusiast things that are there in the real world. So from that perspective, it's fair. But like, there's a lot of baggage right now in NFTs, and nobody cares if there's a pretentious cyclist, right? Like, cyclist has all the adoption that it needs. It gets more every day. It's fine. Right. We're not there yet with digital ownership. So it is a little bit dicey to jump to that point, right?
Well, cycling's not a pseudo Ponzi or just flat out Ponzi, right? So
buy my bike.
It doesn't
buy
have
my
that
bike
problem.
bags. Come on, man.
Okay, so do you use your PFP in a professional sense as well, like on your email, anything like that, or is it just strictly Twitter?
No, I do. So I use it in our company Slack. I use it in Discord. I don't use it in email. I don't have a PFP in email. But I do. I represent myself with that PFP in some professional places, like our work Slack. I do it just because it's cool, just because I like it,
Mhm.
and it's more fun than a serious headshot, you know. So
Yeah.
I like it for that reason.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah, but I didn't build a brand
Yeah, that's
like
good.
Punk 6529. Like I'm not going that far with it.
You can only own one digital asset for the rest of your life. What would it be? It could be a fungible token, an NFT, and yeah, you can DCA it too, right? You can only buy this one though.
I'm going to buy an item that has an experience attached to it that will continue on. Like I don't want I've got plenty of investments in real life. I don't need a digital item to serve as an investment for me. That is not the need that I have. If I'm going to buy one digital asset for the rest of my life, it's going to be something that has an experience with it that can continue on for the rest of my life. Like that experience is going to need to grow with me as a person. And there are no NFTs out there today that slam dunk that story. So I'm going to try to help build some of those.
Nice. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Most people would have said like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? Just buy that for the rest
Yeah,
of
if
their
it was
life.
one, if you say what coin, what crypto only one for the rest of your life, that's a hard. It would be Bitcoin or Ethereum. And if you've gun to my head, maybe pick one. It would be Ethereum, just because you can build on that one. Although now you can build on Bitcoin, and there's some cool stuff happening there, so that might shift. But today, people are building on Ethereum, and I'm a user experience guy, so that's where the user experiences are. So it would be Ethereum for me. But I'm not an ETH maxi. I'm, like I said, chain agnostic. What about you?
Kim, you got some?
Yeah.
For digital asset and coin, what is your one?
Well, your answer was so good that now I'm ashamed to give my answer.
You could just say same.
Same.
Ditto.
No,
I'm out.
yeah, I would probably buy CryptoPunks from a digital asset. I think that's the stable coin, the NFT world, and then I would actually probably go Bitcoin if I had to go just one coin.
Respectable.
So yeah.
I feel like those are two very.
What about you,
I
Kate?
was gonna say I feel like those are two very classic.
Go Gutter Cat Gang.
I mean, in terms of coin,
And Cardano.
yeah, in terms of coin, yeah, that's a good question. I'd probably say ApeCoin. No, I'm just joking. I mean, I do like ApeCoin actually. Buy
I thought
ApeCoin,
you were going to
everyone.
say Doge or something.
Doge. Oh
Doge.
my gosh. I think definitely Bitcoin or Ethereum. I mean, yeah, Kevin, you kind of already. I think you summed it up perfectly. But I actually think the digital asset part is kind of interesting, Kevin, because you mentioned like, something that'll give you like an experience over time, because you have other things that kind of solve the investment part of your life and what you need, and I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's like a joke, but I don't want to like shill it more. But I do think like Bored Ape Yacht Club and like Mutant Ape Yacht Club kind of actually fulfill that. Like I have to say, because like they're just unfolding and executing at such a speed where it's like every week there's something new to look forward to, a new minting experience. And then Ape Fest and like the community meetups, and I don't know, there's just so much richness to that where it's like, I could go and play in the other side demo. I can look forward to my new mints for my little heavy metal power box thing. And like maybe I'll be able to go to like Brooklyn and see like Snoop Dogg and Eminem perform. Like, I don't know, to me that's like a very enriching like club to be a part of. Yeah.
Totally. They're probably the closest thing to what I described that's out there right now. So I can't disagree with what you said at all. I think the one part that they're missing is the assets you own don't change, right? Like you got your ape, it gets you into all these cool things, lets you participate in the trips and go hang out with DJs and get on your cruises and all that cool stuff. But it's still the same Bored Ape. Like I kind of want the NFT that I want my own one of needs to change it needs to grow. Like I need more metadata on that thing as the experiences that I go with it on. Those stories need to come and stay on the NFT.
Yeah,
And
I
follow me
agree.
around.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think even like when you were mentioning like, oh, like playtime, like how cool would it be just to like, if you saw an NFT, it's like this. I mean, I guess you could kind of go through Etherscan and see, but it's kind of clunky. But it would be nice if it was just super clean. Like this NFT's only had 2 users, and the last one was like Kevin,
Yeah.
and Kevin held that NFT for like 5 years. Like that's pretty badass. Or like he attended like 5 Ape Fests. Like that's like the top 1% of attendance rate of
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
just be
this
sick.
is the gun that Ninja used in the finals of the championship tournament and got the headshot on the kill. Remember that moment? In fact, click here and it has a clip and you can play it. Like those kind of stories are going to be awesome when they're on chain. So at Microsoft for the casual games, I got this little taste of transparent development that I never thought I would have, didn't expect it. But like we're working on games that like Solitaire and Minesweeper, so these aren't hush hush, can't talk about what we're building, right? Like of course we're building Solitaire and Minesweeper and trying to make some of our games better. So because of that, we were able to involve the community and say like, hey, let's make an inner circle, and you just sign up for it. Like you just enter your email and you're in the inner circle. It's not like it was low supply, high demand. You just enter your email and you're in the inner circle, right? And as an inner circle member, we'll tell you what we're doing. We'll occasionally be like, hey, what game should we make next? And which of these variants do you like better of this screen? Like beta testing, all that stuff you just got. And the audience just freaking loved it. It's like they felt like, holy crap, the game studio is talking about what they're building and including us. This is insane. And then from the developer's perspective, it was also unique because like for decades, it's just been like, sorry, I can't talk about what we're working on, but next year there'll be an announcement. It'll be really cool. Like that's just the lay of the land in video games. And so being able to talk about what you're building with the community, get like validation or invalidation early before you ship it is incredible. And I'm just like, man, after that experience, it's a little taste of what Web3 is, right? But I got a little bit of it in Web 2, and it was so amazing and validating. And I'm like, yes, this is the future of certain types of game development.
It's so true.
So what happens when you're like in a financialized game and your community wants you to go one direction, but you know it to be a bad direction, and you're like, okay, but now you have this dilemma. They're going to dump the assets, right? And that's going to be bad for the game. It's going to be bad for all the users' experience. But I want to lean into the community, but I know more than the community. Like, how would you, wrestle with that?
I think the problem you just described is a symptom of a game that is designed where that is a problem. If that's a weird circular logic here, but let me see if it makes sense. Like it needs to not be you need to be able to make the decisions that are in the best interests of the game to live on. So the needs of the many and the needs of the few, right? Just like nerfing an item, nerfing the warlock in WoW, like it had to be done, but Vitalik raged, quit, and table flipped and started his own coin, right? Like, but it didn't hurt the game. It just, some people got mad, and like you can't please everybody. So that's game development, right? Like you got your vocal minority flaming you for some of the changes, but then the silent majority are like, keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome. They don't say it, and you just have to trust that that's there by the metrics that you're seeing in your data. So I think the same applies here. Like the fact that it's Web3 doesn't change that. If you design a game where the floor price will wreck the entire game, then you've designed the game badly. Like you shouldn't be making a game where that can happen. Just like nerfing the warlock didn't wreck WoW. If some people decide to dump one of your assets, it shouldn't wreck the game, right? Like, that seems like an easy problem to solve in game design. You just have to be very careful about where your player motivations are and who is affected by what decisions, and making sure that those can be localized.
So thought experiment then. Let's say Yuga makes some bad centralized decision, not necessarily game related, just within the ecosystem, and that dumps Bored Apes. Do we think they're done, or they come back from that?
I don't think they're going to be done until they close their doors. I mean, they can take steps back. Like look at Doodles, Clonex, and Moonbirds, right? Like I would say that all three of those have taken a step back, but I don't think they're done. 10 years from now, you could look back and be like, see, that was the beginning of the end, and one of those guys went away. But like, I don't think you could predict that right now. They just took a step back. So, and they all made, you could argue, poor centralized decisions, right? All of them have in some respects. So if Yuga were to do that, no, I don't think they're done. And they have, like, if you think of the community as like your emotional capital, like people's emotional capital with Yuga right now is pretty full. Like it's a bucket that's got a lot of fluid in it. And so they can do some withdrawals from that before people say it's empty and we're out of here. So I think they get a couple free passes of bad decisions before they're done. Whereas like if Clonex, Moonbirds, or Doodles made a really bad centralized decision from where they're at now, I would be like, people are running close to empty, and then you just try to do a withdrawal. That's rough. They might go bankrupt on that emotional bank account.
That makes a ton of sense. And then the emotional bank account, I love that idea because it's true. And half the time I feel like in Web3, it's not so much like what you do, but like how you do it. And I think like as long as the community felt like they were involved or like had some transparency, I think it lands a lot better. And I think like, the Moonbirds going CC0 with 0 input or heads up after they were sold IP rights is just like, oof, that's like a tough
And what
one.
was so funny about that is that the Moonbirds team was so sure that the community was going to be like, cheer them on. And it was such a blind side when they hated it. And we're like, what could have possibly predicted that? It's like, I don't know, involving the community could have helped a little bit, right? Like the same thing happened with Ubisoft's NFT thing. They thought it was going to be a slam dunk that everyone loves NFTs and they're going to love to see it in Ghost Recon. And then like, wait, what? How do you hate that? I think what you said is great. Like it's not always what you do, it's how you do it and feeling like the community's involved. And I think DGods is probably one of the best examples of that. Right? Like the community is just so healthy and they feel warm and cozy and as far as the what, like, is there a ton of utility and great user experience? Not really, but they have a really healthy, strong community and the community loves the project. They love the team. They feel heard. They feel listened to. It's a really good example of what I think you were describing.
Yeah, totally.
So real quick on that, because I think the pushback I would have on like the DGod stuff is that Frank is providing this like first class experience, right? Somebody on Twitter Space the other day likened him to like the Dana White of NFTs, and he plays this like larger than life character. I mean, he doesn't want all of Dana's characteristics, but like the good ones. He plays this larger than life character. He's on Spaces all day and night talking to his holders. He knows them. He follows them on Twitter. He interacts with them. How important do you think that is for a successful community to have this like star, the golden boy? Is it possible to do it without it? I mean, Yuga aside, right? I mean, we've seen that playbook. But
I think it is very important to have, I don't know that you have to have a rock star charismatic leader out there every day, but I do think your team or some of them have to be out there a lot. I just feel like Web3 is too community centric to just have hooded shadowy coders behind the door. You gotta be out there with your community, and you don't have to be Frank level of charisma, but you do have to have a face of the company, and the team has to be out there in some way. You got to have some of them, the people who don't mind talking, That's how I see it. I don't think we'll see. I think it will be very few, the number of brands we see that don't do that succeed, but there will be far more who do it. Do you agree? I'm curious.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's the problem for like Doodles, for instance, right? They have like these poopy characters, they have Evan and stuff, but those guys are largely nowhere, right? And nowhere to be found. I think Proof's an interesting thought experiment because they do have Kevin Rose and he is this sort of enigmatic person, but he doesn't seem to have that same star-studded power that Frank has. I mean, people just love that guy. I mean, they're throwing flowers at him any chance they get. Maybe Kevin's just messed up too many times. I don't really know. Like he's just withdrawn too much on that emotional bank account that it's kind of hurt him at this point. Because I remember that was the big push. You know, I remember people were pushing me, Proof pass on me and Moonbirds. And I was like, who cares about this? Like, I don't know who these guys are. Like, they're nobodies. And they were like, Kevin Rose, Kevin Rose. I'm like, you mean that dude that did stuff like 20 years ago? And so I was like, what is he? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, that's not that impressive. But everybody was like hyped up on that, and it just doesn't seem to have taken them very far. So I think they're.
That's funny. That's totally going to be me in some amount of years. You mean the guy who made like Dungeon Siege and Solitaire and this Web3 game years ago? Yeah. What has he done lately? Like, I don't know. Hopefully, I won't ever let that happen because I enjoy being out there in the community and talking to everybody too. So it's fun for me.
Yeah. And I think with that said, I think that's like a perfect note to end on. And I just want to say thank you so much for, sharing your time with us this weekend. And, I was really stoked that we were able to go long form, go deep and into different topics. And it was great speaking with you. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it was awesome. Awesome being here. Thanks for having me. I'd be happy to join in anytime you want to riff on stuff in the future.
Yeah, I was about to say, with some of our guests, so many people are building right now, and I'm excited to have everybody back on after they've shipped like their initial product to like, kind of just debrief on that and, revisit the market and stuff. So yeah, appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks a lot. Sundays are precious time for most people. So we're honored that you spent it with us. Let's take care and, we'll be in touch soon.
Sounds great.